Oranges, lemons, limes, and grapefruits, and plenty of others, make up these citrus fruits, and all their acidic goodness, and they've played a colossal and underappreciated role in human history. Citrus is a genus of flowering trees that include trees bearing some of the most famous fruits that I already mentioned, along with lesser known varieties such as clementines and mandarins, and even some that you probably have never heard of, such as the Buddha's hand. Like many other tropical fruits, such as bananas, the genus Citrus traces its origins back to the jungles of Southeast Asia. It is likely that the native peoples of this region crossbred similar plants in the citrus genus, making it difficult to pinpoint their exact origin. It is likely that their evolutionary origin traces to the Indian subcontinent, though, and through pollination and the dispersal of seeds, they naturally spread to the islands of Southeast Asia. While they can move across island through winds and birds, it's an arduous journey, and the separation of vast distances and waterways led to speciation of the citrus genre. I meant genus. While all of these citrus trees and shrubs have had recent ancestry, they diverged in various directions, depending on their climate, soil, etc. In biogeography, there's a concept called Wallace's Line, an invisible line separating Southeast Asia and, well, the other half of Southeast Asia. Bananas started on the oceanic side and moved towards the Asian side, whereas citrus fruits started on the Asian side and moved both to the oceanic side and even further westward. While fruits were crossing the line of various islands, so were people. The original inhabitants, the Melanesian peoples, found themselves overrun by Austronesian people groups, who became the dominant people group of Southeast Asia. With more advanced technology, they managed to cultivate and spread citrus fruit well into the mainland. One Austronesian people group, the Polynesians, would travel into the vastness of the Pacific, oftentimes bringing citrus fruit with them. However, it was the movement into the European landmass, or more accurately Eurasian landmass, that would have a far greater impact. Through a combination of nature spreading seeds to the wilds and waters and claws and guts of animals, as well as moving through trade routes and the military units of various armies, citrus fruit moved into much of Asia and eventually Europe and Africa. What is even more interesting is that citrus fruit is more likely to adapt to changing climates at various regions on a geographic continuum, until they manage to not only survive in the far drier Middle East but also thrive. From the Middle East, in numerous cultivar forms, they managed to make their way to the Mediterranean basin, where they found their way to Europe via Cyprus. By the Classical Age, they were already widespread throughout much of Greece, Persia, and Egyptian lands, and spreading throughout much of North Africa. The Carthaginians, Rome's greatest enemies, located in what is now Tunisia, had traces of citrus fruit in their ruins. The Romans hated Carthage, which they destroyed, but they did share Carthage's love of citrus fruits, which became a staple across various parts of the empire, areas like North Africa, the Levant, and southern Europe. The more northern parts of the empire were just too cold for cultivation, and without refrigeration, it is unlikely that anyone outside of the most privileged people had access to citrus fruit there. Keep in mind that citrus fruits the Romans ate and used were not the same ones that are used today. They had citron, among other varieties, and it would not be until the arrival of Muslim empires that lemons and some oranges would find their way to southern Europe. To this day, lemon juice, rather than vinegar, is the primary source of acidity in various cuisines in countries like Lebanon, Syria, Israel, Turkey, etc. Most of these early citrus fruits that made their way into Europe were, after all, very sour. Even oranges were just sour oranges, not sweet oranges. However, when the age of exploration kicked in, Portuguese sailors would set up trading posts across much of coastal Africa and the Indian Ocean, and oftentimes brought back sweeter oranges and mandarins. In the Iberian Peninsula, there was now a flow of various different crops. Sour kinds coming from the Middle East by land, and sweet varieties from Asia by sea. These would be cultivated and crossbred into different forms. The Portuguese would spread their love of these sweet oranges to their neighbors, the Spanish, would eventually embark on their own age of exploration, this time westward into the New World, eventually being the first Europeans to set foot in what is now the southern United States in what is now Florida. The Spaniards who settled the Floridan swamps were few in number, but they didn't stop them from introducing the origins in spite of all the malaria. To this day, Florida is one of the most iconic producers of a variety of oranges, most notably the navel orange. Citrus fruits, for better or for worse, also helped Europeans travel and in some cases conquer the furthest reaches of the world. See, on long voyages at sea, many sailors would get scurvy, a disease resulting from a lack of vitamin C. This usually results in sore muscles, lethargy, and a reduction in red blood cells. By 1753, a surgeon of the Royal Navy, a man by the name of James Lynn, proved that scurvy is due to a lack of vitamin C, and that citrus fruits are rich in vitamin C, and as a result, Captain Cook ordered his sailors to consume as much citrus fruit as possible whenever they were at a harbor. This reduced scurvy, and as a result, Europeans were able to get far longer in their voyages into the Pacific, making contact with Hawaii, settling the foundations of British Australia and New Zealand. Because of this, the Dutch were also able to colonize Indonesia, and the Portuguese set up shop in Macau off the coast of China as well as East Timor. Today, Brazil, India, southern China, Mexico, and the southern US produce the most oranges due to their subtropical climates. Lemons, on the other hand, are a hybrid between sour oranges and the very, very sour citron. A fruit so sour and with less juice that today it's really only used for fragrances, not food. This mostly took place in India and Bangladesh. The lemons then spread throughout much of the Muslim world and North Africa, and then through Sicily into Europe, and they became a major cash crop in Muslim Spain. When the Spaniards kicked out the Muslims and took their lemons, they would eventually transport some of these lemons to the Americas, where they were used for, well, vitamin C to prevent scurvy. If you move to lime, on the other hand, you get more of a complex history that is oftentimes more associated with Mexican cuisine, but probably emerged from Persia long before the nation-state of Mexico. This is why the most common type of limes are called Persian limes. Mexico would nonetheless dominate the lime trade eventually. The American limes in the Florida Keys, also known as key limes, would also be cultivated. However, due to the fact that Florida Keys are small in terms of their landmass and labor is cheaper in Mexico, much of the lime cultivation in the United States has moved to Mexico after the NAFTA agreements. Then we get to lesser known types of limes, such as the finger lime. Look it up. Moving on to grapefruits. Unlike oranges or lemons or limes, these are far more modern, really only emerging around the age of exploration when Europeans had already set up citrus plantations across the Caribbean. The Jamaican sweet orange probably traces back to Spain, mixed with an unknown East Asian cultivar in the Americas, resulting in the grapefruit, which is far more bitter than most other citrus fruits. Now that's globalization for you. Funny enough, early proto-versions of the grapefruit were actually called the forbidden fruits, and by the 1800s they would be cultivated in Florida under the name grapefruits. I don't know why they're called that, because they don't taste anything like grapes, and honestly, I think they're kind of gross. Anyway, that's a brief history of how citrus fruit changed the world you live in. Next time you drink some orange juice or squeeze a lemon, acknowledge that even something as unsuspecting as an orange can transform the world.